Unmuted. Muted.
So, people from online are able to hear me, right? Okay, right, yeah. See, if there is some doubt, for last 5 minutes, I'll just go through all the doubts what you pinged in the chat. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Now, got the studio. I'm just logging into the system. Okay? So today our focus will be on building the database. How do we build the database in HANA? So HANA is ultimately a database, right? So when you say database, there is something called schema, which itself is referred as a database. HANA is a database, but within this, we're going to create a lot of schemas. Each schema itself can be referred as database. Yeah. So because all your database artifacts like table, view, procedures, column views, sequences, all this will be organized in form of every database. Every database object is organized or qualified with schema names. Okay, so you first create schema. Under the schema, you go over creating a lot of database artifacts like say table, database view, column views, procedures, functions, sequences, triggers, all this stuff. Yeah. So first, let's start creating about schema. You do it like create schema, and I'll just go with this number 5 cubics. So when it comes to creating schema, see, for most of the database artifacts, what you would create, you will find some flexibilities with UI, user interface you can create, or with SQL. So we're going to touch both of the functionalities. How do you create the, let's say, table? How to create table with UI? How to create table with SQL also. Okay. But when it comes to schema, it will be through SQL. But you can still create schema from some other links through which it does create automatically. But we'll focus it on later now. But now it's with SQL. Create schema name. So this gets created. Okay. Or I can also say this way: owned by some username. I go with this way. When I say, see, if you just say create schemas with whatever the user you have logged in and you have created the schema, only that particular user will have access to that particular schema. So I've logged in with system user, and if I just execute this statement, say create schema name, it does create a schema, and that will be accessed. That will be accessed by only this particular user system. Let's say I have a case like I've logged in with system user and I'm trying to create a schema which should be accessed by a different user. Then I would say create schema name owned by the other person, the other user. Clear? So let's say now I have other users. Okay, let's say new user 1. So this is a different user. And when he gets into catalog, he is not able to see every schema, he is able to see only new user 1. Okay. Now what I want is I would like to create a schema called something like 99 cubics, which is supposed to be owned by a user called new user 1. Yeah? So if so just select the line what you want to execute and then say click on this F8. So what I'm doing, logged in as system user. Look at this. You can see you logged in as system user, and you created a schema which is going to be owned by a different user called new user one. So when I get into the schemas, I don't find anything like 99 cubics. Do I find this? Nothing. But when you log in with this user ID as new user, if you see the catalogs, does he find this 99 cubics? Means you created a schema which is getting owned by a different user. You logged in as system user and you're trying to create a schema which has to be owned by a different user. That's one. But in this case, but I would like to create a schema which I would like to have access to. Say 5 cubics. If I just create it like this, you log in with system user. If you just execute the statement create schema name, it creates a schema and that will be accessed by whom? By the user with whom you have logged in. So system user will have access to this. Now if I refresh, I'll start getting to see my schema, 5 cubics. Okay, that is one point. And one more point is one more point, okay. See, in HANA database, you're going to create users first. Like, so you'll have administration where you create users and roles, authors, same stuff, you still have it there. For every user you create, it does also create a schema with the same names. What is use case? I'll come to that. What I'm saying is, for every user ID you create, it does create a schema with the same name, and you'll have access to that schema. For example, say, let me create a new user. Okay. See, in the security folder, you just right click and say what? New user. Okay. So let me say new user, say something like 8, then some password. Okay. And I've done nothing. I just create. Now, no already exists. 9. So I create user called what? New user 18. So what I'll do, I'll connect to the system with this new user. Okay. Instead of creating, say, right click, add system, I can say select the system, right click, add system with what? Different user. Who is a new user 18. First time when you log in, ask for the change of the password. So when you do this, so when you see this user, when he gets into catalog, you would see a schema called new user 18. Okay, so even when you create a new user, it does create a schema with the same name of it, and which will be accessed only by that particular user alone. Clear on this, boss? Okay. Use of user specific schemas. Okay. What is it? So when he's asking what is use case of user specific schemas, okay? Any database artifacts you create under this schema will be accessed only by you. As long as you provide authorizations to user, they cannot access it. Suppose now if I go to this particular user, system user, see, do you see a new user 18 schema? No. But if this person wants, he can give authorizations to system user if he wants. So what I'll do, let's say I log in with this new user 18, and then I want this because he is the owner of that schema, so he can grant access to a different user if required. So I'll say grant select on which schema, what is the schema name? New user 18 to what? To let's say system user with grant option I want. So actually, new user 18 is a user who is the owner of the schema new user 18, and I've logged into HANA database with the user ID new user 18, and I'm granting access to system user. So now I've done this. So now if I go to system user, I should find the schema called, sorry, let me remove this filter. See, do you find schema new NMPQR? So only the person who is owner of that schema will be able to access the schema, and he can grant access to different user if required. Okay, was fine. I'm filtering it for cubics. I don't want other schemas. Okay. So, but we going to deal with this 5 cubics which I created for myself. Okay. So either ways you can go about creating schemas. And one more point you have to observe is this is interview questions. They say uh, when you install the system, initially you will have some default schemas of the systems. What are those? Sys is a default schema. Sys is a default schema which will have, so the sys schema will have all the system tables in it. All the HANA specific repository tables are in sys schema. For example, you create table, you create a database table. Information about every table is stored into some standard table in HANA bus, and those standard tables will be into sys schema. All the metadata repository tables will be in sys schema, and there are other schemas like sysbi, sysbic, anything which is going with sys is all system relevant schemas. So sys is the main schema for all the system relevant tables, and all the system relevant tables are row store tables. All system relevant tables are row store tables. Okay, you can see this sys expand. I can expand tables. So you find lots of adapters, caches, tables, PQRS. See, lots of stuff. And what the table says is you will not be able to understand this table so easily. So what they've done, they have built some ready-made views. You know what is a view? Database view. They built a lot of ready-made views on top of those tables, through which you can understand the data clearly. So we'll get into those views and tables. Yeah. These are all system-relevant tables and views. So, so sys is referred to be a system keyword. So you cannot use that word. Okay. All the system-relevant schemas would have the naming with sys. So sys is the default schema. Sysbi, sysbic. These are three important ones. And you'll also have sysrepo, RT, sys. If you configure SLT, you'll also have schema called sysrepl. Information about all the replication configurations in sysrepl, replication configurations. Right? Okay. And next point. So if you look at BW powered by HANA, for example, if I look at this BW system, so this is actually, if you go to system status, this is actually BW, which is the backend database is what? HDB, HANA database. And it says the server name is what? Host is what? SAP Cube. And the instance is what? System ID is SP9 and instance is what? 01. This is the one, look at this. SP9 is a system ID, SAP Cubex is my server, and 01 is my instance. So for this particular BW system, this is the backend database. Okay. Now if you look at this system here, and what is it here? It says owner. You see something like owner. What is it? SAP ABAP1 is the owner. Then what happens? In this database, you'll have a schema with the same name. Let me remove the filter. Look at this, SAP ABAP1. So here owner is nothing but user And with the same username, you would also have what? Schema. And this is referred as BW schema in HANA database. Since your BW is sitting on top of HANA, it will have a BW schema in HANA database. All the data dictionary of your BW sits into that particular schema. For example, you create an info cube. Does it create fact table and dimension tables? All those tables gets created into this BW schema. Let's say create a DSO. Does it create active table, new table, change log? It does create that into this BW schema. You understand this? Yeah. And that's what, so when they say BW schema, this is what they're referring to. You'll have BW system on top of HANA database, and that would get connected with some owner. With the same owner name, you would have a schema maintained. Schema, you'll have all the tables relevant to your BW dictionary. If it is ECC with HANA, all the dictionary of the ECC will be into ECC schema. You'll get to see the status block. This is the owner name. With the same owner name, you'll have the schema. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. You're saying, is there any scenario like global schema? There's nothing like global schema. You create a schema. If you want that to be accessed by 100 users, you have to provide authorizations to all the 100 users. There's nothing like global schema. Okay. Good. Okay. You're okay with creating schema? So this is what maximum you can touch on that. Okay. So next would be what? Or focus more on what table here. So schema is just like logical grouping of all your database artifacts. That is important. It's not about grouping. And all your database artifacts are qualified with schema. So when you say, show me the content of a table, say employee, system doesn't understand it. When I say, show me the contents of a table employee of the schema, you have to be, the database object be qualified with the schema name always. Okay? Mm-hmm. Next, let's go on with database table. So once I have the schema here, look at this, I've got 5 cubic schema. So this can hold all this kind of database artifacts like tables, views, figures, synonyms, sequences, procedures, indexes, functions, column views, all this can get into this. Okay, now we'll start with database table, because any database ultimately have to store data in form of a table. Okay, but the only difference here would be what? You'll have 2 different types of tables, row store or what? Column store, depending on, see, but when you see at the application, you would see it the same way. But in the backend, how does it store that particular tables is different. We already seen about row store mechanism and column store. Internally, it will be different. Good. Now I can go about creating this table with UI or with SQL also. Even by writing SQL, I can create my table, or I can also create my table with UI, user interface also. Now let's see first with creating UI in the SQL. Now look at this. So this is my schema. Under this, create a table. And I would like to create a column store table. Yeah, simple. So let's select this tables folder and right click on this, and then you get option as well. New table. Or you can also right click on the schema, you get option as new table. Either in the context menu of schema, or when you expand schema, you get to see a table folder. In the context menu, you get to see this option. Right? Done? Anywhere it's fine. It's a new table. So it does take you to a screen where you can start defining your table. It's more or less like creating table in SC11 in your ABAP dictionary. It's pretty much same, yeah. And then what does it ask you? Table name is what? I want a table name as employee, or let's say EMP table. And what is this? The schema under which you would like to have the table created. And look at this here. Here it tells you what type of table do you want. Column store or row store or table types. Column store or row store or table types. We understand row store and column store, but there's something else, table type. Table type cannot hold any data. This is like declaring your types. We generally use this in while defining your procedures first. In ABAP, do you use a keyword like types, begin, and then you define some types? So table type is that. Say you're writing some stored procedures, you want to create some temporary tables with certain structure. So what you'll do, you create a table type, then you say you create a local temporary table, say like this types. That's where we use table type only for declarations, not for staging your data. Okay. Now what table I want? I want as column store. Then you start listing out columns. What do you say? One, the name of the column I want plus EMP number. So I want, and you got to specify the name of the column, and then it's going to be then the day type of the columns. Obviously, any database or any application, you obviously specify the day type for it. There's no concept of date element here. You have to specify the day types. Now, if you go top, see n varchar is all alphanumeric. Okay. And you have integer. See, if you look at these four, integer, tiny int, small int, big int is all about integers. Only thing is the bit combination will be different. For example, if it is tiny integer, it is only 8 bit. When I say 8 bit, 2 power minus 2 power 8 to positive 2 power 8. That's the number range what it is. 8 bit combination. With 8 bits, how many numbers max it can hold depends on 2 power 8. Atla. So tiny integer is 8 bit and then tiny, and then this small int is 16 bit and integer is 32 bit and big int is 64 bit. So when I say 64 bit, it will be 2 power 64 minus, and then positive 2 power 64 is the number range what it can hold. Okay? Same way, if you want, you look at double, real, float, decimal, this is all about our data holding numbers with decimals. And again, bit combination will differ based on the number of questions will differ. And then you'll have date, which will hold what? A date, and then what? Time, and then timestamp will hold what? Timestamp, date, and time together. And then binary files, see all this like binary. You can hold any big text. Let's say you have a big HTML file or big PDF file, and I would like to put the content of a PDF file into that. Okay, then I can use my binary files. Content of PDF is binary bus. But if you want to all this where binary, and if you want to put the PDF file itself or image file itself into a table, then I use enclub, blob. When I want to put the file itself into the table as a column, then I would go with this data, club, enclub, blob. Then there's something called short text, like without, for short text, you still specify length. It's a very big string. And when you say text, unlimited length, you don't specify any length, it can hold any big string. Okay. And then there's something like ST pointer geometer. When you want to hold geocharacteristic information like longitude, altitude, then you go with ST pointer, ST geometer. Now, point here is this is all okay. Either you choose row store, you still find same set of slight difference, but you still find same set of data types. But even if you choose column store, you find still same name, same data types. So while creating table, you would not find any difference here. Once the table is created internally, if it is column store, system will convert those data types into column store specific data types. For row store, it does use same data like big int, small int, all those stuff. But once the table is created, in case of column store, it is going to convert those data types to column store specific date. If you give it as integer, it is going to take it something like CS underscore int. It converts into column store specific data types. So there is a concept like mapping of data types of row store specific to column store specific data types. I can show you that also. If you see, so if you see this, if it is normal, all this integer it refers as what? What is for columns? If you use tiny int, small int, integer, it does take it as what? CS. If you use real, double, float, all it takes it as what? CS float here, CS double, column store specific data. Like if you decimal, it takes this type. If it is varchar, it takes it as what? Varchar, n varchar, club, n blob, alphanum, it takes it as what? String, CS string or alphanum. And if it is blob or var binary, it takes it raw data. See, but for you, when you creating table, it's like same set of data, but internally system does convert those data types to column store specific data types. If you want to see this, data types, it's like 1 point. I'm going to send this PDF to you from the SQL file. It's like section 1.3. We'll have the see this. You can refer from there. Section 1.3. Okay. Just make a note of that section so you can refer to that. Done. Yeah. Chalo. Okay. I want employee number. I wanted that to be holding numbers. Okay. So I'll go with integer. For integer, I don't have to specify any length here, and I want this to be primary keywords. I would say, look at this. Just click on this. It becomes primary key and not null. Okay. And then if you want, I can just specify even the description for this column, saying employee number. Okay. Next, I want one more column, and I can also give spaces also in the column names. In the technical name of the column, I can also specify space. No issues. Yeah. EMP name, varchar, so I want S20, and I want S. See, when it is varchar or nvarchar, I'm going to specify the length of it. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. I just wanted 2 columns. Done. So let's not worry on others. No, just say active. So this is about creating table. So does it automatically execute the required SQL statements in the backend? See, it is executing like create column table so and so so and so so and so. As if you want to create this table as part of SQL, we use a statement like create table statement. When I do this creation of table with the UI, internally it does execute those SQL statements automatically. Okay, and then comment statement is for this providing the descriptions. This is like creating a table. Yeah? So I should start seeing the table, EMP table. So is it a column store table? So if it is column store table, should it have main store, delta store, and those concepts? If you see right click and say open definition again, if you go to runtime information, here you can see its memory consumption. What is this? Main store and memory consumption in what? Delta store. Do you see that? So every time you create a column store, I told you to make it optimized for writing also. SAP does hold 2 storages. One is called main, one is called what? Delta. Main is more optimized for writing, sorry, for reading, and delta is optimized for writing. Read operation on what? Main and delta, but write operation goes to what? Delta. Then when does the data move from delta to main? Delta merge. We'll deal with that. But just to make show you that there is main store and delta store. Okay, boss? Yeah. This is about creating a table, boss. Same thing if you want to create it as a row store, right click, say what? New table, EMP row. I'll drop down, set this row store, EMP number, and set some length 20. That's it. And look at this, which is create row table. Yeah. So will it have anything like main store, delta store? This is a row store table. So like this, you can either create row store table or column store table. But mostly it will be column store table for application purpose. But all the system tables would be row store table. Now question is, if I create it as row store, can I convert it to column store later? Yes, we can do. Even if the data is present, I can still convert in. Even if the table stores data, I will still be able to convert the row store table to column store table to row store. Anyway, I can do. With an alter statement, I can always convert the table from row store to column store. Okay, good. The next question is, let's say, after the table is created, I would like to modify this table. Say, I would like to open this table, open definition. And I actually wanted to add one more column, let's say designation, employee designation. So how do I edit? See, it doesn't allow me for editing here, right? So select the table name, yeah. on the name of the table name, right click and say what? Edit. Or right click, anywhere you can right click and say what? Edit. Then you start adding up, add a column, EMP, DS designation, where can this also I wanted as 20. I would like to say employee designation something. Done? Okay, boss? I can just activate again. So when I change this and activate, does it execute alter statement? Look at this. Normally, when you want to define the database objects, we use create statement. But when you want to change them, we use alter statements. Yeah, this one. Execute. Okay, boss? Yeah. Okay. Next step is how do we create the table or row store or column store using SQL. Yeah. UI. You can either create with UI or using SQL also. Now look at this. Okay, now look at this. See, look at this syntax. It's create. We use the data definition language statements. Create. Then the type of table what you want. Call. If you don't specify anything, by default it goes it as row store. If you want it as column, you have to explicitly specify column. So then the type of table, then the keyword table, then this key in which schema you want. We want it as what 5 cubics, and the table name is I would say, and with these two columns, and open the parenthesis, close. No, I'm going to send those notepad files to you. You don't have to write. Just get the concept. And then within the parenthesis, I'm going to list out all the columns what you want, and I'm going to separate those columns definitely with comma. And the last column will not have the comma here. So column name 1, data type. If you want it, you can specify the constraints. I want that to be primary key, and I want that to be not null also. And I want another column is EMP name with varchar of length 20. So execute this, and I will find a table here. So EMP SQL, say open definition, you still find the same. You still get to see the same, okay? Same way, if you want to create a row store table, then so then what? So create row table. In what scheme I want? 5 cubics and EMP. Okay, was same except this keyword type of the table. Every rest all will be same. No, by default is row store. Say I'll take this table and I don't specify anything here. So select this. So I'm not never specified a type here. Oh, sorry, this was a difference. Never change the scheme. 5 cubics. So in this case, I've never specified a table type. So see, EMP, sorry, this is column store. Sorry, row store. Simulate, no, yeah, this is row store, correct. By default, it takes row store, and we can recognize with this icon here. Look at this, if you see the symbol with rows like this, it's row store, and if you see columns, it's column store. Default is row, it's correct. So this is simple way of creating these tables like this, yeah. We can also focus on copying the existing table and creating, like say, I already have a table A. I would like to create table B same as A. I would also have scenarios like that. Yeah? So we can do that by using subquery or by using like statement also. Say for example, do what I'm doing. Okay. So what I'm doing, I'm just creating one column table as well. What is this table name? EMP base with employee ID and employee name. And I'm just inserting by using this insert statement. We'll discuss on the syntax later. Insert into what? The table name. So you're qualifying this table name with the schema name. Yeah? And say values and with you will just pass because I've got two columns. I'm just passing employed as integer, one as integer and Pratap as string. Yeah? So when I execute these two statements, it will create the table and insert the data into it. Now, do you have a table called EMP base? And you can also see the content of this table with 3 rows in it. So how did I see the content? I can right click on this and say what? Open content. I can see the content like this, or can I fire a select statement on it? You can say select star from. You can drag the table name like this. Yeah? When I fire this select, it would give me same results. Anyway, it's like when it says I'm seeing content of a table, it's as good as firing a select onto the table. Good. So I have a table called EMP base with some 3 records into it. So now I would like to create a table like this. Yeah? Like this. By using like keyword. Look at this. Create column table. What is the table name I want? 5 cubics is my schema. I'm saying create column table like this table. And when I use like, it does not basically copy data. So if you want with the data, you should say with data. So it is going to create a table called EMP with the data. The table name is with the data. With the data, it is copies. But if I use say as by default does not copy any data, but if you want explicit control that no data comes in, you can say with what? No data. Now I'll execute this. Now I should see a table called EMP with the data. Will you find data also into it? I said like with the data. Now if I just say like with no data, then EMP with no. See, look at this. Is there any content in it? No. And if I just say just like without any parameter like with data or without data, what does it do? By default does not copy any data. If I just say like, but if you, when you use like, no data is copied. But if you want data, explicitly use a keyword with data. Then I can also go about creating a copy of the tables by using sub-selects also, sub-queries also like this. Okay. I'm saying create column table, so and so, as, and this is a subquery which I'm to select star from what? Select star from so and so table will return me some data from. If I just select that only run this, it is going to get this result. With this result, create me a table like this. So when I use this create create as a sub-select, it does copy with the data by default. Like ante without data default. If I use as, it does create table with the data box. Yeah. So if I just create it, if you look at this with data sub, you see it's copied with data box. And if I execute this one, now if you, I would like use select, sub-select and create my table, but without no data. And then I use attach the word with what? With no data. Where does it create with no data sub? So no data, even though I use sub select as, there's no data copied into this. Okay. What is it? Attanala. The alter anta. You're saying if a SQL dwara, then it says you want to modify a table with a new column, then we would go with using alter statement. Okay, yes. Next set. Now, how do we define primary key and foreign? Generally, primary key and foreign key is basic concept where you basically relate the tables. Which one? Yeah, yeah. Main store and delta store. No, no. Actually, we can use it. When you basically read, it does bring data from main and delta both. But while writing, it does get into delta store. It's not like two tables. It's like two memory locations for a single table. That's all. It does from main plus delta. It is union of both tables. Main when you perform something called delta merge, we'll see that. That is the concept of column store table. But for row store, it's normal. Yeah. And this, look at that. Okay, boss. So how do we specify it for primary key and foreign key? So I'm just creating a table called department. Okay. I'm just creating a table called department with department number and what? Department name. And where my department number is the primary key. This is how you specify it. Okay. Select this and say execute. Now what I want is I'm creating an employees table where employee ID, employee name and department number. And in this table, employee ID is a primary key. But since the primary key of in the primary department number and department number playing in this table. So when a primary key of one table takes part in another table, we can refer it as what? For a foreign key. So I'm saying foreign key department number references which table? This table, this department table of which column bus? References to department number of this table. On delete cascade means what? If I am deleting an entry from this table, it must match an entry into this, otherwise no. Suppose if I delete an entry department number here, it does should allow me check the referential integrity into other tables. There's something cascade and it will not check, it will check dependency. Without dependency, if there's something like restrict and cascade, if it's a restrict, it will check the dependency. If it's a cascade, no dependency is checked at all. Okay. So now, by using this statement, foreign key is what column you want, and it refers to which table of which column you define the foreign key. It's the same way. Okay. So by you now, what happens? You'll have the if you open this table, so you can see employees, right? You'll see a department table with normal department name. You'll see a table called employees. And the department number in this table will be referencing to what? To this particular department. So you'll have to also link up the tables with the help of primary key and foreign key. Okay. Next, we have something. We also have some types of tables as global temporary tables and local temporary tables. What this means, like normal tables. Okay. Within these tables, we have some special type of tables as global temporary tables and local temporary tables also. Okay. When I say global temporary column table, and the global temporary row table, global temporary column table, we can have both the variations. When I say global temporary column table, the definition of the table can be viewed by everyone. The definition of the table is viewed by everyone. It's visible globally, but the content is visible only for that session alone. Okay, see, I'll show you this now. What I'm doing is, I'm opening a different session for this, separate session, okay, and I'm creating this. So I use this global temporary is a keyword to specify it is going to be, when it's a global table, global temporary, definition is global for everyone, but the content will be local for this particular session alone. Okay. So use a keyword global temporary column table, and with some two columns, I'm just creating it. Okay. So create global temporary column table, create this. Now will you see this? What is it? EMP temp global, EMP temp. Can everyone see the content? So can you see the definition? So anyone who has got access to the schema will be able to see the table first. Okay. Now when I say right click and see the content, what is it? No data. Why? We have not yet inserted any data yet. So now let me insert data into this. I mean just inserting 4 records into this table. Insert into this table 1, 2, 3, 4 records into this table. Okay. Now when I so when it says select, it means what? What are the records? 4 records I've inserted. I'm trying to see the data. I'm seeing 4 records. But when I go here and see the content, so the content is made visible only in that session alone. Yeah. Suppose if I copy the select statement and go to a different session and try to run, data rabbits. So metadata, the structure is global, but the content is local. That is what I mean. Global temporary tables. Generally, when you're writing some complex stored, in what scenario do we use this? And when you're writing some complex stored procedures, you will have a requirement to store some temporary data into some temporary tables and then leverage it again for later purposes. So when I say when the procedure is running, only in that session this table would be holding data into it. And once the program is out, once the procedure is out and the session is closed, the data is gone. So can I use those in those kind of scenarios like temporary tables? Yeah. Okay. Next, you'll have some local temporary table. You'll have something called what? Local when I say local temporary table, the definition of the table, content of the table is made valid only for that session. In case of global, what is happening? The table definitions are global, but the content is local. But here the definition, content, everything is local. And one more thing, main point is the table name must prefix with hash, the font symbol. So let me open on one more session for this. Look at this. Create local temporary. I use what? Instead of global, I say what? Local temporary tables. Okay, good. And this table must be prefixed with what? Okay. So, and one more thing is when you're creating a local temporary, it cannot have primary keys. Primary key is not allowed in this kind of tables. Okay. Global. I'll just say global temporary is also not allowed. Okay, create this table and then I've just inserted the data. So did I create a table called EMP temp local column? And let me check this here. Do I get to see that in my schema? EMP temp, where is it? Is it here? Nothing. So definition is also specific to this session alone. And when I try to run the select, I can see data. But when I try to run this select from a different session, no data. So data kada ఏమంటుంది చూడు. See the two things. You select runs and then there's no data. It shows no data, but select itself is not running. It says no table with this name. Why? So the definition of the table itself is local to that session. That is what local. So when I'm firing this select, it is throwing an error saying could not execute so invalid table. There's no table with this name on them. Means what? The definition of the table itself is local and content is also local. When I say global temporary, definition of the table is global, but the content is local for the session. Okay, boss? Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's what. When you're basically working with stored procedures, when there's lots of complex looping, for example, let's say I have 100 records. Out of 100 records, let's say you're basically dealing with to fill one column. With lots of logic, you try to fill some columns. And then if there are some columns, there might be some, if the logic doesn't satisfy, some columns will be blank. And which are blank again has to be, we need to run through the loop. So then in that case, what are the rows which are blank? I can fill into some temporary table and loop through the table. Like when you want multiple iterations of loops, we'll be generally using this temporary kind of tables. Yeah. Basically, the temporary tables are session work memory space. Yeah. And I can also create this in the UI. For example, when you're creating a new table, EMP temp UI something, EMP number, EMP name 20. There's some tab called what? Further properties. If you drop down, here you can say local, what is it? Global. And then set. This becomes like, see, what is global temporary column type? For local, you will not find, because local, the definition is not allowed to others, so you don't find it. It has to create from SQL only. But global temporary table can be created from here by using this further properties. Temporary table type is what? Global. Okay, UI lo itla kuda create chesukochu. So when you create it as temporary table global, definition is visible to everyone, but content is specific to that particular active session when you insert data. And there's okay. Okay. Next, there's some concept called logging. Yeah? There's some concept called logging. We can specify it as no logging or something. Yeah? Now, what does this do? Okay? So I create normal table is global.
Unmuted. Muted.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Now, when I say logging, you specify for, retention of data for certain timing, only for 300 seconds or what it is. But what it does is, it does remove the data after when my memory reaches 80% of the physical memory is used. When my memory is used for 80% of the physical memory, then it does delete that. But after certain timing of 300 seconds, it does not drop. It will drop the data after 300 seconds only when the memory reaches 80% of is used. Hmm. See, it's a main memory, right? Runtime, it will be using some temporary memory. But when the physical temporary memory is always used greater than 80%, then this will be dropped. Heap, we call it heap memory. When it reaches 80%, then this table will be dropped completely. The content is fixed. Generally, it's fixed. But in the administration, you'll have some parameters where you can configure that to be not 80% or 70 something. But generally, standard takes as 80%. So you just specify it as what? No logging and retention is for so and so timing. So system does not do any logging and the data will be deleted when it reaches this percentage of time. You just use this keyword no logging and then do that. You see, there's a concept does store data only for certain point of time. When the memory reaches 80%, the data is dropped from this table automatically. About logging and no logging. So we'll start in more details onto this table more because the would is like unloading. Get the syntax with the dark. Okay, don't have to worry so much on the syntax. Huh? Send across this. Make sure you give all your email IDs to Pawan or those documents to you today. Thanks. Yeah.